This video is going to have a look at calculating time differences using either GMT, so Greenwich Mean Time, or UTC, being the Coordinated Universal Time, as our method of calculation. So these methods split the world into different zones, from plus 12 to minus 12. So all of these zones are referenced to our original zone of 0, which roughly lines up to the zone where the Greenwich meridian would be. So the time zones where it's plus means it's going to be ahead of our Greenwich meridian time, so ahead of our whatever time it is in that zone. Conversely, if it's a negative number, then that time zone is going to be behind the time in our Greenwich time zone, our 0 time zone. So we'll see that the point where our plus 12 and our minus 12 meet is going to be the international date line, where we change dates if we are traveling across it. So if I'm starting in Australia and flying across international date line over to America, I can see that I'm going across it, but I'm going from a positive time zone to a negative time zone. So when I go from a positive time zone to a negative time zone, I'm going to lose a day. Oppositely, if I'm starting from America and I'm going across to China, I'm crossing the international date line, but I'm going from a negative time zone to a positive time zone, I'm going to gain a day. So that's important to remember when we are looking at these time zones. If we are going from a positive to a negative time zone, I'm going to lose a day, so it's going to be the day before. If I'm going from a negative to a positive, it's going to be gaining a day, so I'm going to go to the next day if my time crosses over past that midnight point. So let's have a look at how do we apply these time zones to be able to complete calculations. So in the first example, we have Brisbane that's in a time zone of GMT plus 10, and we have New York that's in a time zone of GMT minus 5, and we want to calculate what the time difference is between Brisbane and New York. So when we have a look, we've got a time zone of plus 10 and a time zone of minus 5. So starting off with my bigger number, which is plus 10, I've got plus 10, and then I'm going to take away my second time zone, which is going to be negative 5. And just remember that that is still a negative 5 when we're taking it away. So because when we are subtracting a negative number, it becomes a positive, that calculation then really becomes 10 plus 5, which is equal to 15 hours. So the time difference between Brisbane and New York is going to be 15 hours. So let's have a look at a second example where we are calculating with the different time zones. So in the next example, we have Perth, that's in a GMT plus 8 time zone, and Cape Town, which is a time zone of GMT plus 1. When it is 11 AM in Cape Town, what time is the time in Perth? So to be able to determine what time it is in Perth, I first need to be able to calculate what the time difference between the two cities are going to be. So the time difference is going to be the difference between plus 8 and plus 1. So because I've got two plus numbers, I can just subtract them to find out what the difference is going to be. So the difference between plus 8 and plus 1 is going to be 7 hours. And applying the information I have in the question, because Perth has the larger time zone of being plus 8, I know that Perth is going to be ahead of Cape Town. And being able to determine what city is ahead of the other city is going to become important when we want to work out what time it is in the other city. So to do that calculation, and I find it's good to be able to use 24-hour time in this calculation, I've got Cape Town. That is, current time is 11 o'clock AM, so that's going to be 11 AM. So 1100 hours, and then I want to add 7 hours onto that. So I'm going to add 7 hours onto it, so 700, and that's going to get me a total of 1800 hours, which is going to be the time in Perth. So when Cape Town is at 11 o'clock, Perth is going to be at 1800 hours. So what I want to do now is convert that back into our normal time, our 924-hour time. So the easiest way to do that is just to minus 12 from that 1800. So that's going to be 6 p.m. So the time in Perth is going to be 6 p.m. Because I haven't had to change days as part of my calculation, I'm just going to leave it as 6 p.m. But I'm going to put in this that it is the same day when I'm answering the question. If I knew what day it was, I could include that specific day. But because the question only says 11 a.m., it doesn't tell us what day of the week. I'm just going to use same day to let the person who's looking at my answer know that I know that it is the same day. So the time in Perth is going to be 6 p.m. on the same day. So that's two examples of calculations we can do when we're calculating time differences and different times between two different locations within two different time zones, bearing in mind that both of those have not had a change of day involved in the calculation.